Hello and welcome back to the Potentia Podcasts. I'm your favorite host, Chelsea Toxar, and welcome to the third edition of This Week in Power weekly briefing on the stories that actually matter at the intersection of AI, technology, geopolitics, and the people pulling the levers. The US-Iran war ends, but the nuclear question doesn't. Anthropic's most dangerous model gets released, but blocked. Xi Jinping visits Pyongyang, and Musk becomes the world's first trillionaire. We also have Fail of the Week and some Lord of the Ring metaphors from Dario and myself. This is for the week of June 8th to 15th, 2026. Here's your briefing on what happened, why it matters, and what it tells us about where power is shifting. Let's get into it. So first, the Iran deal, war ends, on paper at least. President Trump and Iran declared they had reached an agreement intended to end more than 3 months of war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's oil flows. The deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all, Trump wrote on a Truth Social post. Then, in characteristically Trump fashion, ships of the world, start your engines, let the oil flow. Trump also met with Macron today and kicked off G7 meetings, saying great things are going to happen with the Iran deal. This new deal comes after his first term when he scrapped Obama's Iran deal. Some people argue he did this out of spite. Here's what the new deal is supposed to accomplish based on reporting from US and Iranian officials. The full text has not been publicly released, though as of June 15th, Vice President J.D. Vance says it has been digitally signed, with full text to be released soon. Immediate ceasefire extension for 60 days, during which a permanent deal will be negotiated. The reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, both the Iranian blockade and the US counter-blockade are supposed to lift on the day of signing. Iran has controlled the strait since shortly after the war began on February 28th, when US and Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours targeting Iranian missiles, air defenses, and military infrastructure. Israel-Hezbollah fighting in Lebanon is supposed to stop. Iran made this a condition for the deal, though Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Monday that Israel would keep troops in southern Lebanon indefinitely. Formal signing is scheduled for Friday, June 19th in Switzerland, mediated by Pakistan, Qatar playing a supporting role. What's left unresolved? Iran's nuclear program is the big ticket. Trump told the New York Times that Iran would be permitted low-level enrichment, a dramatic reversal from his previous insistence on dismantling the entire program. Iran's enrichment rights remain core sticking point for what people are discussing. Then there's the frozen Iranian assets worth billions of dollars abroad, and the lifting of U.S. international sanctions, both of which are still to be negotiated. Now, what happens if talks fail in 60 days? Trump told the New York Times he could relaunch attacks on Iran, or make the U.S. the guardian of the Middle East in return for 20% of the region's revenues. Iran's deputy foreign minister called the deal a victory. Trump called it a win. European leaders from the UK, France, Germany, and Italy praised it. The UN Secretary General called it a critical step. Everyone is claiming victory because everyone needs this to work. The Strait of Hormuz closure has been devastating the global economy for months. Oil prices have been crushing consumers, and neither side can afford to keep fighting indefinitely. But the hard parts are all ahead. This is ceasefire extension with a framework, not necessarily a peace. The nuclear question, the original reason Trump cites for launching the war, is still unresolved. Israel is also not directly involved and has reservations, and the 60-day clock starts Friday. Moving on to point 2, we come to the Anthropic gauntlet. Fable, the guardrail disaster, the US block, and Dario's manifesto. This is the story of the week in AI, and it's really 5 sub-events braided together. Let's walk through the timeline. June 9th, Claude Fable 5 launches. Anthropic released Claude Fable 5, a public version of its feared and restricted Mythos model, designed with safety guardrails to make it safe for general use. Think of it as Mythos with training wheels. The raw capability is there, but Anthropic added guardrails specifically around cybersecurity and biology topics to prevent misuse. This was supposed to be the big moment. After months of restricting Mythos to a small consortium through Project Glasswing, Anthropic was finally giving the world access to Mythos-class capabilities. Then, June 10th, the guardrail backlash. It went sideways almost immediately. Cybersecurity researchers and professionals discovered that Fable's guardrails were comically overzealous. Valentina Palmiotti, a well-known security researcher at IBM X-Force, said Fable rejects any request that could be tangentially cyber-related, even innocuous tasks like reading a blog post. Matt Swish, a cybersecurity veteran, told TechCrunch that if you ask it to write secure code, it assumes cybersecurity-related work instead of software engineering best practices, and you get downgraded. The guardrails appeared to be keyword-based. Anything in the lexical field of cybersecurity or biology triggered a fallback to Claude Opus 4.8, a less capable model. I know that some other people got restricted on it. I think Jordan Schneider on China Talk mentioned this as well. A bit ironic that the safety measures were too blunt to distinguish between offense and defense. I digress. On to June 11th. Anthropic apologizes. Within days, Anthropic reversed course. The company acknowledged it had made the wrong trade-off and announced it would make the guardrails visible rather than invisible, and that queries flagged by safety systems would be removed rather than silently downgraded. In line with its conservative approach to risk, it underscores the fundamental tension Anthropic has been wrestling with since Mythos. How do you release a model this powerful without it being misused while still making it useful to the people who need it most? Then on June 12th, Dario Amodei publishes his Policy on the AI Exponential. The document covers 5 areas: regulation and public safety, macroeconomics and tax policy, scientific innovation, the balance of power between state and society, and geopolitics. It opens with the Lord of the Rings metaphor, the hobbit's trying to rouse the slow-moving tree beard to defend his forest, while the trees operates at a completely different speed than the threats. That's been Amodei's frame for AI and government. The technology moves at lightning speed, and policy institutions move like sentient trees. He makes several key proposals in FAA for AI, job displacement framework, geopolitical coalition, and the civil liberties protections. Jumping a little more into each, for the FAA for AI, he suggests mandatory third-party testing of frontier models for 4 specific risks: cybersecurity, biological weapons, loss of control, and automated R&D acceleration. The government would have the power to block deployment if these risks are unacceptable. Third-party evaluation could be done by a government agency similar to the FAA or authorized private organizations. Second, job displacement framework, wage insurance, retention tax incentives, workforce training, and, if displacement becomes permanent, universal basic income finance through taxes on AI companies or capital gains. Anthropic's providing substantial financial backing for this framework. Amodei writes explicitly that fast economic growth should create the tax base for shared prosperity. Then, third point, geopolitical tension. Democracy should form an AI alliance, sharing chips and semiconductor equipment within the coalition while denying it to its adversaries, coordinating safety standards, and sharing AI's benefits. He says a nation that possesses powerful AI facing one without it could be the equivalent of an army of World War II Marines facing an army of medieval swordsmen. And then his last main point is civil liberties protections to ban domestic autonomous weapons. Close the bulk data collection loophole, guarantee citizens access to AI advice during adverse government action, ensuring the government can't use AI against you while denying you the same tools. All in all, Amodei is arguing that the era of voluntary guardrails is over, and that formal government-enforced regulation is now necessary and urgent. He also rejects the framing of public concern as a PR problem. As he writes, people are worried about AI because they correctly perceive that its risks are real, not because AI CEOs have been insufficiently Panglossian. Then on June 12th and 13th, the U.S. government blocks Fable and Mythos. The U.S. Commerce Department issued an export control directive ordering Anthropic to suspend access to both Fable 5 and Mythos 5 for all foreign nationals, citing national security concerns. This isn't even just outside the company, but also for people working within Anthropic. Anthropic complied and disabled the models. Other Claude models, including Opus 4.8, remain available, but the 2 most capable models in Anthropic's arsenal, the ones representing the frontier of what AI can do in cybersecurity and scientific research, are now dark for anyone who is not an American citizen. So what does this mean in practice? The US government just classified Mythos-class AI capabilities alongside weapons-grade technology for export control purposes. This is a precedent-setting move. It treats frontier AI not as software products, but as strategic assets, the same category as advanced semiconductors and military hardware. With this in mind, the implications are enormous. If the U.S. starts treating AI models as export control technologies, every frontier lab faces similar restrictions. It creates a bifurcated AI world. one tier of capabilities for Americans and trusted allies, another for everyone else. And it raises the question Dario Modi's essay asked just hours before the order dropped. How do democracies share AI benefits while denying it to adversaries? The answer apparently is that they don't, at least not yet. They just block everything and sort it out later. At the same time, we see similar moves in blocking AI capabilities and intellectual moving outside of, say, China. So this seems to be the way that nation states are moving in terms of guarding their frontier technologies. Third point of the week, and one that many people have been paying attention to, is the SpaceX IPO, $75 billion, a trillionaire, and a new ticker. On June 12th, SpaceX made its market debut on the NASDAQ under the ticker SPCX. The company raised $75 billion by selling 555.6 million shares at $135 each. This is the largest IPO in history, more than every other U.S. IPO combined over the last 2 years. By the end of the first trading day, shares had surged 19% up to roughly $161, valuing SpaceX at approximately $2.1 trillion. And yes, Elon Musk became the world's first trillionaire. The S-1 was confidentially filed on April 1st with a valuation target that jumped from $1.75 trillion to over $2 trillion during the roadshow. The confidential filing process itself drew scrutiny. It allowed SpaceX to avoid the kind of public disclosure that typically accompanies an IPO this size. The bigger picture, this isn't just about SpaceX or Musk. Combined with OpenAI's S1 filing last month with a $1 trillion target, Anthropic's rumored $380 billion valuation, and the broader stampede of AI-adjacent companies heading to public markets, we're witnessing a capital formation event unlike anything since the dot-com era. Point 4 for this week, Xi Jinping goes to Pyongyang. Nuclear weapons are not on the agenda. On June 8th to 9th, Chinese President Xi Jinping made his first visit to North Korea in 7 years, and his first overseas trip of 2026. He met with Kim Jong-un, toured the Workers' Party Central Cadres Training School, and participated in a series of symbolic events marking the 65th anniversary of the China-North Korea Mutual Defense Treaty. The two sides agreed to deepen cooperation across a sweeping range of areas: trade, agriculture, construction, science and technology, healthcare, education, culture, tourism, and people-to-people exchanges. Xi called for injecting powerful momentum into bilateral ties and pledged unwavering support for Kim. North Korea's readout said the two leaders reached a satisfactory consensus of views, alignment language that was conspicuously absent from their last summit in September of 2025. It's fun because when I was actually studying in Beijing, I had some North Koreans in my classes, but they weren't allowed to talk to us. I digress. Back to the news. Denuclearization was not brought up. Neither side's official readout mentioned it, not once. This is the same week that North Korean state media released images of a new nuclear facility, and Kim ordered missile production expanded 2.5 times over the next 5 years. Days before Xi's arrival, Kim Yo-jong, Kim's sister and a senior party official, publicly called U.S. claims of a shared denuclearization goal with China fake information. Xi's decision to not raise denuclearization, despite the U.S. State Department reaffirming just days earlier that Trump and Xi had agreed on it during their May summit, amounts to tacit Chinese acceptance of North Korea's nuclear status. As the ISW puts it, the omission could represent tacit PRC acceptance of North Korea's nuclear status. At the same time, these types of discussions may be behind scenes as is more culturally appropriate for the two nations. We cannot be sure. What we can understand is that this visit was about Beijing managing its alliances. China is pulling North Korea back into its orbit after Kim's deepening ties with Russia, who elevated their relationship to what both sides now call an alliance. Beijing doesn't fear being replaced by Moscow as Pyongyang's primary patron, but it may be uneasy about Kim cultivating a second great power backer. Xi's trip was partly preemptive. Trump has openly expressed interest in meeting Kim again, and if Beijing anticipates a possible Trump-Kim summit, it wants to get ahead of it. After all, Xi didn't start meeting with Kim until 2018, after Trump first announced plans to do so. North Korea is approaching this relationship from a position of greater confidence than at any point in recent years, it would seem. It has Russia as a formal ally, China re-engaging at the highest level, and a nuclear arsenal that is actively expanding. The sanctions regime is weakening, and this visit may signal that the world's second largest power is comfortable with that reality. For the US, South Korea, and Japan, this is a problem. The question isn't whether North Korea will give up its nukes. It won't. But the question is whether the US, South Korea, Japan alliance can build a deterrence framework that accounts for nuclear North Korea backed by China and Russia as the permanent features of the geopolitical landscape. Moving on to the next piece of news, Trump wants a piece of the AI companies. We covered this briefly before. On June 5th, Trump told reporters he's considering the U.S. government taking equity stakes in top AI companies. He compared it to the government's 10% stake in Intel last year, saying he expects to meet the top leaders of AI companies next week to discuss the idea. The administration has already taken stakes in Intel and other companies, but extending that model to Frontier AI Labs would be unprecedented. Sanders also expressed interest in this, though his approach would be different than that Trump is proposing. Now, despite this news, tech stocks actually gained on the news. The market read it as a signal that the government views AI companies as strategically vital enough to invest in directly, which implies favorable regulatory treatment. These implications would be significant for if the U.S. government holds equity in AI companies while simultaneously regulating them, issuing export controls on their models, and relying on them for national security applications. The line between regulator and investor becomes a bit blurred. This is the kind of state-corporate entanglement that Dario Modi's essay we just talked about explicitly warned about when he wrote, AI will soon become so capable that I worry cannot be safely, fully entrusted to either governments or companies, and there must be checks and balances on each. Something to note. A meeting between Trump and AI industry leaders is being planned, which would be the first direct negotiation between the White House and Frontier AI Labs about government ownership stakes. If that meeting happens, let's watch what gets traded. Regulatory relief in exchange for equity, export control exemptions in exchange for government access. Rounding it all up, we have our fail of the week, Meta's AI gulag. Meta has not really been winning on the PR campaign trail lately, as they were also another recent fail of the week. We'll get into that. On June 12th, reports surfaced that Meta's 3-month-old Applied AI unit, a 6,500-person division created to train AI models, is on the verge of internal revolt. Engineers drafted into the unit described the work primarily generating puzzles and coding problems to train AI models as soul-crushing. One employee told reporters it's literally the gulag. The term stuck, and around 1,600 employees signed an internal protest letter demanding changes to working conditions and the nature of their work. One literally said, "Tell him he's a piece of shit." The backdrop here is not looking good. This is the same Meta that just cut 8,000 jobs last month while redirecting spending to AI. We see that AI costs are now more expensive than humans at many companies. With Meta, though, the engineers stuck in the Applied AI unit weren't hired for this work initially. Many were reassigned from other teams, pulled into repetitive data labeling and data training, and training data generation work that they view far below their skill level. This also comes after Zuck's mega yacht sailed into Seattle just a few weeks ago. So, Meta is spending tens of billions on AI infrastructure while simultaneously burning through the goodwill of the very people who are supposed to drive their bid in the AI gold rush. 2 weeks ago, the Pope warned about having more without being more. We're seeing that now. In the past, Mark Zuckerberg has openly shared that some of his employees referred to him as the Eye of Sauron. And while Zuckerberg seems to be aware of the potential harm his Eye of Sauron could do, he is consistently hell-bent on pushing his agenda, even if it seems some fall victim to his Eye of Sauron. Will it be that there is only one Lord of the Ring, only one who can bend it to his will, and he does not share power? We shall see. That's it for This Week in Power. This Week in Power is a weekly series. Thank you all for your kind support. Every like, subscribe, follow, share means the world to us. Stay tuned for our upcoming Power Profile series, guest interviews, and more on the podcast. That's it for this week. I'm your favorite host, Chelsea Talksauer. Talk to you soon.
Seem right deep down, so we all wear masks. Everybody want bright lights and they want limelight to shine on a real dark path.